Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha. I head up brand awareness at Reveal. On each episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. You might notice that I'm not in front of the usual Reveal background. I am today in our headquarters in Chicago. We recently did a symposium, our first summer symposium. The signage is still up. That's what's behind me here. Our guest today is Michael Hodgson. Michael is a senior manager, digital and forensic investigations at PwC in the UK. Mike, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, glad to have you with us today. I would like to start, as I often do, by asking, how in the world is it that you ended up where you are doing what you are?
Great question. Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I don't meet many people that say they fall straight into the realms of e-discovery. So I started out my, I guess, my education kind of as a technologist in computer science. And then I had the fortune of joining PwC as a graduate in what was at the time e-discovery, now digital forensics investigation. And so I've kind of been what we call a PwC lifer for the moment. And so through my 8-9 years now at PwC, I've had the pleasure of working on a number of different kind of range of program. I do a lot of work in e-discovery, regulatory work, but also things like data breach, data remediations, things like that. So yeah, I kind of fell into it almost, which I think is quite a common answer I'm sure you must get.
Yeah, it is. What has surprised me is that just in the past year, I've started to get people respond to this by saying, I went to school to study e-discovery, which was a concept I didn't even know existed. I had no idea that could be done. But for any of us who've been in this for a while, of course, we came at it from odd directions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me more about what you do today.
Yeah, so I guess so our team specifically within the firm does a lot of work around helping organizations with a range of data challenges. And so that, most of the time is helping organizations respond to crises, whether that's investigatory, internal investigation work, regulatory disclosures, responding to data breaches. We sit within a wider deals practice, so helping organizations make sense of data within wider M&A action. But we also do a lot of, and probably where a lot of my time is spent, is helping organizations on more of the transformation side of things. So helping organizations, respond to crises, but then how do organizations then prepare better in the future? How do I use what has happened to take learnings and to build operational resilience, to build a business that can help kind of respond to that better in the future? So a lot of my time is helping organizations, assess their operating model, helping them select and implement technology, make better use of their in-house technology, but also assess kind of things like risks, existing risks, and how do we overcome those? Obviously, automation, AI, all the buzzwords I'm sure everyone's using at the moment plays a massive part in that as well. So how do we make the most of the latest trends and technologies that are out there to kind of innovate and automate a lot of what organizations do?
What, that covers a broad range. Give me to the extent it's appropriate, some examples to make this a little more concrete?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that I'm speaking to a lot of organizations about at the moment is really that I guess idea that a lot of organizations will go through crises, and we're seeing only this week, last week, a lot of organizations are going through data breaches on the rise, ransomware attacks. Obviously, there's ever increasing amount of regulatory scrutiny. And when crises hit organizations, I think what many organizations and us as service providers find is that many organizations are not set up to be able to deal with those in an efficient and effective manner. And actually, although you should never, I guess, want or expect to have one of those hit, it's good practice to make sure that you're in the best position possible to respond should that ever be the case. And so a lot of the conversations I'm having with clients is around, okay, what are the learnings from, and I think a lot of people in this industry obviously have experience of what are the challenges organizations have when something like this hits. So, the speed to mobilization, have I got organizations that can actually help me with this? Do I understand where my data is? Do I understand who my stakeholders are? And how can I take learnings from that? And I guess glean value, longer term value. And so a lot of the work we're doing with organizations at the moment is the forward-looking transformational, okay, let's learn from what's happened and let's put into place longer-term transformation kind of agendas to help. For instance, it might be helping organizations build an internal capability to deal with these things in the future. It might be, and this is very prevalent right now, and actually I saw some articles obviously have come out recently around data breaches, and obviously the information that gets leaked, regulators having far more scrutiny. I saw something around the SEC now looking at requesting from organizations that have had data breaches in the law firm space their client names and things like that. And so it's, okay, well, do you have a good sense of your data and what information, what sensitive information, what personal information resides and where? And so I think a lot more conversations we're having now, obviously around crisis, but it's about, okay, well, how do we learn from that? So how do we learn from that and actually build a more effective business internally? How do we, I guess, remediate before you have to respond, as it were? And so I think that's a lot of the conversations that we're having at the moment.
Do you have people coming to you ahead of time saying we would like to be prepared before a crisis hits? Or is the more common path, they've had a crisis, you've helped them through the crisis, and now they're saying, we don't want to ever go through that experience again?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, the answer is the latter is certainly more common. I think, as with any organization, especially when we came out of the likes of COVID and there was a lot of focus on, obviously in many industries and markets right now, there's scrutiny on kind of workforce, headcount, budgetary restraints, things like that. And so internally, the discussion is always much harder to have, opening up that budget for proactive, I guess, transformational agendas when you haven't had the reactive side. But we are seeing a lot more organizations, actually, we're seeing a lot more conversations where they're saying, well, we haven't had something, but we know of this. And so a lot of the, I guess, the articles in the news that I referenced earlier are helping to get organizations to start thinking about this. And we are having a lot more open kind of, I guess, proactive conversations with organizations to say, well, yeah, I mean, yes, there is sometimes there is an investment in this, but actually think about it from a longer term perspective. The cost of getting this wrong is significantly higher. And that's not just commercial costs. That might be reputational damage. It might be any number of things. And so, yes, most of the time it comes from a reactive discussion, but we are seeing an increase in organizations wanting to get ahead of this before inevitably something might happen.
For those in that latter group, the ones who want to get ahead of the problem, are they reaching out to you independently? Are they having these discussions with you as the result of actions you've taken? How does this play out?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I mean, really in a number of different ways. Obviously, we have broad spectrum of services that we as an organization provide to our clients. And so quite a lot of the conversations that we can have are off the back of, I guess, wider transformation work we might be doing as an organization. It might be as part of, we do a lot of work around kind of legal technology advisory work. And so a lot of that plays in these kind of, certainly with the stakeholders and the business functions within organizations. But actually, yeah, a lot of it is us. What we like to do, and we've done a few times, is where organizations have gone through this and they've had the unfortunate situation of having had to deal with this reactively. We use that as a great use case to educate other organizations with our clients, so that they can understand what the potential impact might be. And so, yeah, we have organizations that will reach out and they'll say, actually, we've seen this in the press. We're a bit worried. What are your thoughts? Is this something that we think we should be doing? You know, can you come in and help us assess where we are from a maturity perspective in comparison to our peers in the market? But actually, what we're also trying to do is really around an education piece, is help organizations understand what the impacts are. And it varies depending on you know, what subject we're talking about. You know, a lot of it's around helping organizations assess their internal operating model, especially coming out of COVID. There was a focus around you know, location of workforce, hybrid working, the use of technology, obviously with everything around Gen AI. Are we making best use of our technology, our people, our processes, and especially around data? Have we got our data landscape and data estate in order? So yeah, so it's a bit of a mixture, really.
So for that larger group of engagements, the people who've had a crisis and don't want that to happen again, I am sure that just like lawsuits, every project is unique. But at the same time, there must be common patterns in terms of what you are dealing with and then how you go about approaching it. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, every project, and that's why this industry is so enjoyable to be in, right? There's, you know, you get to work with such a wide range of clients, of organizations, of people, of different projects. I think the underlying, some of the underlying themes really are the same irrespective of project. So, you know, if you think about the challenges most organizations face when a crisis hits, it's understanding, okay, where is my data? How do I access that? Do I have the right processes and procedures in place to be able to collect that in a defensible manner? Do I have an understanding of the right stakeholders that need to be involved in that process? Where I need to rely on external service providers like PwC or others, you know, have we got that in place already? If not, you know, do we need to go through data security, IT security, you know, risk assessments? And so many of the challenges remain the same, whether the project matter might differ. And so what we are often finding, you know, if I was to look at, I guess, trends across those that we help on, I think it's really a number of things. It's understanding your business model and looking at whether you can, something was to land, whether you have the right processes and procedures in place. And so that can cover a wide range of things. You know, do you have a one or more service providers, whether it be law firms, legal service providers, that you can call upon should something land? And in the event that it does, do you have those procedures, playbooks, standard operating procedures in place so that you know you can collect, well, firstly, identify and scope, but also collect information in a defensible manner? And, you know, if we look at financial services, a great example of, has been going through the last year or two, has been going through significant challenges with regulators around ability to collect communication information or off personal devices. Have you got your policies and procedures in place to be able to deal with that? And so, you know, that's certainly a big one. And we see, if we look at, you know, responding, or once you've responded to the crisis, what's the long-term focus? It's, okay, well, actually, what I've learned from that crisis is I didn't have a good understanding of my data. I didn't have a good understanding of my retention policies, where data sat. Actually, even when I started collecting it, I was encountering, you know, issues. There was information in there we probably shouldn't have had as an organization. And so actually what are we going to do long term? Right, well, we're going to ensure that we put in the right procedures to deal with this in the future. We're going to reassess our retention policies. We're going to maybe go through a data discovery exercise to ensure that we're only holding what is absolutely essential as an organization, minimize not just the risk of that, but the cost of having to analyze and deal with that in the future. And then I guess the other thing is around technology. Most organizations don't have, many organizations don't have the technology to be able to deal with that. And, that doesn't necessarily mean bringing that in-house. That might be using it through a third party. But I think getting, whether it's legacy data, whether it's enterprise solutions like Microsoft and Amazon, it's ensuring that you have the technology that can enable you not just to perform your BAU activities, but in a way that can be as efficient and as practical as possible. Certainly with with the trends in AI that have been coming through recently.
It sounds from the way you describe this as if there are ways in which what you're doing for this work is very similar to what you would do for e-discovery or e-disclosure, but at the same time things that are very different about it. So compare and contrast for me.
Yeah, I think certainly from a similarities perspective, ultimately we are helping organizations get a greater control, get greater oversight, and get, understand their data landscape and their system and technology landscape, and be able to perform their BAU activities as efficiently as possible. And so many of the activities you would perform on any e-discovery job, is ultimately what we're doing here. You help organizations scope their requirements, understand their data systems, understand, where are their pain points, what are their potential risks should something land. I think certainly one of the contrasting, and you already raised it earlier, really one of the challenges, or one of the differences between it is typically when you come in to support an organization from an e-discovery perspective, there is a pressing need, and money is released. The budget becomes much easier to obtain internally because there is a regulatory deadline, or there is a potential reputational risk. Whereas looking at something proactively, there is always that challenge, and there's that difference. And I think one of the focus areas and one of the recommendations we've been providing to a lot of organizations is actually e-discovery is probably one of the core use cases where a lot of this drives from. But what some organizations, and quite a lot of organizations, don't really achieve is the greatest value from what they. So let's take organizations that procure or bring in technology. Are you making greatest use of that across all areas of your business? So yes, you might bring in technology, or you might bring in process and automation for one part of your business, but have you then looked at wider use cases and broadening that out to achieve greatest value? And so one of the areas I've always kind of seen as an area with similarities yet consistencies is around communication, surveillance, and compliance versus the discovery, litigation, investigation use case. And quite often those two worlds don't talk to each other when you're in the same organization. But at the root level, there are significant symmetries there. And I think that's one of the key learnings is for organizations who are going down this transformation journey is think outside the box, engage your wider stakeholders, look at the broader use cases, because ultimately you're bringing something in, you want to make greatest use out of it and get greatest value. And I think that's where there are differences from e-discovery to this, is that actually this is looking at it from a bigger picture and looking at how organizations deal with data just more generally within the business, and trying to bring that all under one idea, one defensible, consistent approach.
So you talked about learnings. How have you used your own learnings from this to build out your internal capability to deal with these types of engagements in the future?
Yeah, and I think that's where really because we have such a wide-ranging set of clients at PwC, and we support all kind of sectors, markets, organization sizes. we have the benefit of coming across. I mean, I think most people working in discovery will attest to the fact that every week there's a new problem to solve, and so part of that benefits us in this kind of, I guess, more transformational side of things, because what we can do, or certainly what I do, is bring learnings from our crisis engagements, from supporting organizations, to turn that into helping organizations advise on how best to implement workflows and best practices. And so it's always an evolving art, e-discovery. There's always something new coming along, whether that's technology, whether that's new data sources, whether that's new regulations. And so when we are supporting organizations with day-to-day crises, investigations, regulatory disclosures, a lot of the learnings from that, a lot of the workflows that are created to support those clients can then feed into the proactive, how do we help organizations deal with these similar problems? And so, an organization A that has the same problem, I'm sure there are 15, 20 other organizations out there that have the same problem. And it's taking those learnings and taking the work that is achieved through that and helping organizations make best use of that. And that's where we benefit a lot from having such an eclectic mix of service offerings and experiences with clients, is that we can build such an array of processes, workflows, anything you can think of, to help future organizations make best use of it in an efficient way and not have to go through that.
It sounds like this can be a fairly complicated set of activities and exercises, potentially spanning a long period of time. How long do these engagements tend to last?
I mean, it depends really, because I think it depends a lot on what the organization wants to achieve. It can be as and obviously these things always happen in stages, right? You don't try and go from the saying, don't run before you can walk. And so part of it is really helping organizations. The first step is usually helping organizations understand and assess, what is it that you want to achieve? What is, what's the low hanging fruit? What is achievable? And you kind of segregate it up into sprints, phases, whatever you might want to call it. And so it really depends on what they're trying to achieve. At the simple level, it might just be assessing what technology is in the market and helping them bring that in-house. It might be helping them solve a particular pain point problem. It might be helping them, implement or create and implement a custom workflow to deal with something. So it really depends. So, it can be anywhere from a few weeks to, an 18, 24 month transformation cost out project. So, and when we look at things like data discovery, helping organizations understand their data landscape and how to ensure they've minimized the risk of their data, typically you do something, pilot, do a pilot on a small amount of data with a technology provider, and then you would look to expand that out, proof of concept and so forth. So it's not always a helpful answer, but it really does depend on what organizations are wanting to achieve, and ultimately it comes down to what are they willing to invest to get that return.
What is the range of types and sizes of organizations you help out with this?
I mean, it really is organizations of any size, to be honest. So obviously, PwC supports some of the biggest, most global clients in the world respond to large FCPA investigations, cross-border investigations, and so many of the organizations who are in the press we support, but we also support smaller startup organizations or organizations that have little to no internal capability, because in reality the services we provide are applicable to any organization in any stage or walk of life. And so again, maybe a slightly unhelpful answer, but typically we do help organizations in most sectors, most markets, and most business profiles.
So when you are brought on to help an organization, large or small, or when others, your competitors are brought on, what should those organizations hope to get out of this process?
So I think really the key thing is, all of these processes are designed to help you reduce risk or reduce cost or increase your return of some form of investment, right? That's ultimately what we're looking to always achieve with organizations. And so I think some of the key takeaways and some of the learnings and I guess the recommendations to many organizations is, if you're not going through a crisis, have a think about whether this is something, have a think about your organization. And what we really try and get organizations to think about is do you need to remediate before you respond? And actually seeking approval, seeking budget for small pilots or small pieces of work here to just, I guess, provide that comfort in a time where there is increasing scrutiny on whether it's investigatory disclosures, whether it's regulatory scrutiny, whether it's data breaches are on the rise. You don't want to be in the press. You don't want to have that reputational damage. You don't want to have that increased cost of having to deal with this retrospectively. Many organizations are now looking to ensure that they've remediated before they have to respond. And if you are looking at bringing in technology, or you are looking at transforming your business, or you are looking at operational change, making sure that you are looking at how do you get greatest value out of that. And that might mean, breaking down some of those internal barriers. It might be bringing across stakeholders from other organizations. And that goes for whether PwC support or whether, as you say, any of our competitors support. This is really, as an organization, what can I think about doing? And looking at partnering with the right providers that will help you along that journey and help you really assess and think about those questions and ultimately get greatest value whilst minimizing the risk as much as possible.
Well, and that does raise the question, how do they then, these potential clients of yours or of your competitors, how do they best evaluate the different folks they could engage to figure out who actually they should choose?
It's a great question. And then there are a number of methods, right? I think I have the pleasure of on a fairly regular basis responding to public tenders, RFIs, RFPs, where you can in a fairly consistent approach engage a number of suppliers. If you're looking to procure technology, a lot of technology providers have kind of partners that you can kind of engage with. But I think in reality, it is really sitting down with each organization, however you may select that starting position, and understanding what it is that they, making sure that your targets, your values are aligned, making sure they understand what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you need, and that they, and I guess just benchmarking their experience and what they think is the best approach, and ensuring it aligns with your business. Because ultimately, those that we continue to help are those that we work with on a regular basis. We take time to understand their business, understand their risks, understand how they work, and that's only then can you really help provide advice and guidance on how best to innovate, transform, and automate. Because you really need to understand businesses and specific businesses to be able to give those pieces of advice and guidance. And so look for those providers that are going to take the time to invest in you, and that really understand what it is that you're looking for and what it is that you need.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been an engaging discussion. Michael Hodgson is a senior manager in the digital and forensic investigations practice at PwC in the UK. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Mike's I'm just losing my ability to talk here. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. It's been great. Thank you.